start of this is that the witness and her husband were in two different locations because they were selling a house, and I'm assuming this new area they've moved into, it sounds to me like it's more wooded and rural, and there's a state park or something nearby. And they'd gone hiking with their dog, her and her husband and the dog, and they got someplace, and she had this scarf on. She took the scarf off and tied it to a tree to remind her where she was, and apparently her and her husband laughed about it because it was, you know, it's a trail. But this scarf will come back later in the story in an interesting way. So KV, you've seen the drawing.
Yeah.
The woman claimed that the critter was about 10 feet tall and about 4 feet wide at the shoulders, and didn't have any expression on its face whatsoever, but looked very human.
Well, that's an incredible story. I mean, that's really incredible.
All right, so the actual encounter took place when she went hiking. It was about 1 p.m. And this area that she went hiking to, apparently there's like a campground or something that you go to, and then you can hike up into these mountains. And she claims that she's been there several times and no one's ever been there. The trails are maintained. Obviously the Park Service is going in there, but she never sees another person. And this time when they got there, her and her dog, and apparently her dog's some kind of pit bull, cattle, you know, attack dog, whatever, lion killer, something, some big brave dog. And they had seen bears in the area, so she had pepper spray with her, and, you know, was prepared. Realized there's some dangers involved in going hiking in the pucker brush here. But as she starts up this trail, she starts to hear, there's a river nearby, what she called pterodactyl calls.
Pterodactyl calls.
Yeah, pterodactyl.
Like something she's heard on a movie. That's
right.
That the sound effect for a pterodactyl.
I'm going to read a little bit of her letter here. She goes, I know there are no pterodactyls, but it is the noise I associated with them after seeing shows that endeavor to create what prehistoric animals were like. They were sort of screams that a large bird would make, one more forceful than the other. My dog and I froze. It sounded like they were between us and the river. I have heard mountain lions before. I have also heard strange noises raccoons can make, though the screams sounded too big to be made by a raccoon. At any rate, my dog was sort of whining, and I was unsure what I was getting into, so I decided to turn around and go back the way I came and simply hike elsewhere. Sounds like a reasonable thing to do, doesn't it? She goes on to say, not long after turning around, about 100 feet ahead of me where the trail turns slightly and slopes downward, I saw something blurry run across the trail. It was brown colored and appeared to be on all fours, and I was almost certain it was a bear or a coyote or something like that. What was odd was my dog's response. He did not want to go get it as he usually does. In fact, he sort of whimpered and leaned against me. I put my right hand on my bear spray and took the safety off, but left it in its holster. I could still hear the pterodactyl screams behind me, though they were not continuous but spaced apart. While moving southbound was closer to my car, and at this point I did not know what was behind me and was pretty sure of what was in front of me and confident that my bear spray could handle any problems. So after coaxing my dog on, we continued. Okay, so I'm going to skip a few things here. Okay, so she tightened up the lead on her dog, and they continued hiking, and apparently the area opened up more, and she was getting closer to where her car was parked. So they hiked for another good 15 minutes or so, and she goes on to say that she heard one of the screams go off behind her. But they don't sound as if they're moving towards her, so, you know, her anxiety is going down a little bit. Now, I'm going to read verbatim here. She goes, I can now see where the trail nears the campground and its grassy area, and that is when, right next to a power line, it steps out and straddles the trail, squaring off with me. I froze in sheer terror, but looked it right in the eyes. It had to be 10 feet tall at least, and it had to be 4 feet wide as it straddled the trail. My only hope out of there. My 60-pound pit bull cattle dog mix let out 3 whimpers and then set on my boots and began to shake. I looked down quickly, and as I did, I noticed it had a hole of something light colored in its hand, but I went ahead and looked it right in the eyes again. Its face had no expression. I saw no teeth, I saw no movement of its face at all, but I can tell you it did not look like a monkey. It looked more human than monkey. And I saw no facial hair, but I'm thinking it must have had hair on its jawline because I did not see a jawline. After looking it in the eyes for the second time, I dropped my glance and asked God for help. And then I began to look at my shaking dog and thought about releasing him from his lead, but I still had the bear spray in my hand. And then I did something I used to do as a child when I was in a stressful situation. I began to count. I started at 1 and counted while looking down at the ground. I heard more of the screams behind me again, and I knew I was now between whatever was behind me and the Sasquatch in front of me. I do not know what number I counted to. My dog was leaning hard against me and shaking. When I heard a slow thump, 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 I could tell from the sound it was walking away from me. I looked up to see it leaving up towards the mountain, and that is when I saw my scarf in its left hand. It was a hand, not a paw. It was a hand. It had my scarf clenched in its fist. Again, pterodactyl screams from way behind me. I pulled my dog, kept my bear spray in my hand and moved forward, made it to my car and left quickly. And then she goes on to say she packed some things and went back to where her husband was, and that's where she's been since. Like she hasn't gone back there on her own. And
I don't blame her. Wow.
She's done a lot of hiking. She's hiked from coast to coast. And apparently spends a lot of time outdoors, has experience with bears and things of that sort.
Wow.
So what do you make of that?
It's an impressive story. I mean,
Here's the thing that's curious about it, is it bears a lot of similarities to other people's stories. I had some correspondence with her. The other thing that she said that wasn't in this letter here was that when she got up to where the thing apparently went in the woods, there was a faint odor.
oh.
She did detect a faint odor
I
from
mean,
it.
it sounds like there's a lot of similarities in other stories, in other accounts. I should say.
What do you think's going on with the dogs? I've got some ideas on these dogs, but you hear this quite frequently. There was another guy, I think in Vermont or New Hampshire, that was the coon hunter that talked about his dog that was a good coon hunting dog and had that encounter with a Bigfoot or Sasquatch and came in frothing and shaking and would never hunt after that.
Wow. I don't know.
See, I'm wondering if these things maybe generate like a high-pitched dog whistle. Because we can't hear dog whistle, but that would be really annoying. I mean, I don't know, maybe it seems as if there's somehow or another, they're either passively, there's something about them that causes these dogs to freak out, or they're actively projecting something at the dog. You see what I'm saying?
So you think it's audio, you know?
It would either have to be odor or audio is the only two things I can think of. And I don't think it would be a passive thing, because when I say passive, I just mean that the critter's not doing anything special and the dog flips out because it comes in contact with it. And most animals have to have some type of learned response. I mean, you're not going to abhor something or avoid something. You have to learn that the stove is hot. You touch the stove, you burn your hand, you keep your hand away from stuff that's hot because you found out that it's hot and it hurts. Same thing with a dog. A dog wouldn't know to fear Sasquatch. That had never encountered one. Thus, I am leaning towards thinking that these things are somehow projecting actively either a super low sound or a super high sound that's freaking these dogs out. And making these dogs so that they don't want to engage this thing.
Right.
The other thing that is troublesome, not troublesome for this woman, because she was lucky enough that nothing bad happened to her, but I get the impression now she's scared of going in the woods with good reason. But last year, there were those two women that disappeared. The one on the Appalachian Trail in Maine, and the woman that was out on Bluff Creek, Willow Creek, with her dog. She disappeared. Now, in David Pauly's 411, there's a number of accounts of people going missing, one person with their dog. Quite frequently a woman with the dog.
Right.
Now I'm wondering if the dog is detrimental to you getting back home safely. Like, what is going on with this dog? Are these dogs able, when these things cloak or go invisible, are they somehow interfering with our ability to perceive stuff and the dog doesn't have that effect? Like some people think, cats can see aliens and ghosts and whatnot, I don't know. But
cats are different. They're always staring at something.
You said cats can hear more than dogs can.
Right. They have a bigger range. And
They can also see. Their eyesight's much better than people. And dogs have the ability to, of course, hear better than people and smell better than people. So dogs actually can't perceive things in the environment that are invisible to us, if you want to use that term. I mean, it's not accessible. That data is not accessible to us, except through the reaction of the dog. Now, these dogs are reacting. That's why I'm saying these dogs are like a tool. These people are having these encounters with these dogs are reacting to something. And I think it's important for us to try to figure out what it is.
Right.
Because it would give us some insight into what's going on here. This thing steps out and squares off to her and blocks the trail.
What's the meaning of that?
Exactly. And it's got her scarf in its hand.
Yeah.
That she'd left there, I don't know, a couple days.
Obvious intimidation tactic.
Something going on there, isn't there?
Yeah. Because,
But it's not super intimidating. It's not doing the rocking behavior. It's not peno-erecting. It's not fluffing its hair up. And it didn't have any kind of facial expression. It was just a blank.
Blocking the trail is an aggressive move.
For a person.
This thing looked like a person.
Well, I know that, but we can't assume that its behaviors, we can't translate its behaviors directly to what we would interpret a human behavior as, because, some humans want to shake hands. Well, some cultures don't want to shake hands. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we might assume that if it's human, it's going to communicate that way. But I agree with it. It does seem intimidating. Mm-hmm. It also seems to me, your encounter was similar to this in one way, that you were looking back in a direction that you had already been, that it didn't expect you to be. And a lot of times people will have these encounters. They'll go someplace, and then they'll either abruptly turn around or they'll change direction. They'll go someplace that they didn't look like it wasn't easy to anticipate they would go.
Right, so they messed up.
Well, the human is going along. It's like an unpredictability. If you're a hunter and you're patterning an animal, they'll tend to follow trails. And humans do the exact same thing. We follow trails. Not only do we follow trails, but a good sniper or a good hunter watches for a rhythm in its prey. You're watching the herd. You're watching, if there's more than one, if there's two or three, you're watching the group. You're trying to figure out what the dynamics are. What's the weak one? What's the one I cut from the herd without the other ones knowing about it? There's a lot you're taking into effect, but you're watching that rhythm to see when it pauses. Where's it going to go next? Right? And if you can anticipate where it's going to go next, maybe you can get to a closer shot. You can get up there ahead of time. You can ambush it, right? The whole idea behind being an ambush predator. And it occurs to me, like in this case right here, she was hearing these sounds. This thing was behind her, keeping tabs on her. Maybe other part of its clan or its group were hunting. Who the hell knows what they were doing with making those weird noises, right?
Right.
But it's kind of like the Allagash one, where the guy, something else whistled and alerted him.
Right.
And when you saw your thing, there was a whistle.
Yeah.
And you turned around, and this thing, you'd already been there and turned around once and turned back again. That's not something that's easy to anticipate that you were going to do.
Oh yeah, those are two separate events on my walk. But yeah, no, I mean when I turned around and saw the figure, I hadn't heard anything. I just changed my mind about what I was going to look at.
So right here, this gives us a couple insights, and maybe people can try this. Maybe people are already trying this. But if you're going hiking, think about this. Think you're going to go hiking, and you've got this plan. And if you're in an area where there's some activity, be unpredictable. Mm-hmm. Right? Start out hiking, turn around and switch back. If you have competent individuals with you, you could even split the group up. Oftentimes, when there's 2 or 3 people, one person leaves. I would highly recommend the person leaving be armed, or have some way to communicate, because oftentimes those are the people that, disappear.
Yeah.
I do think these things scoop you up, and they are so good at hiding that I am beginning to think that if one scoops you up, you're not going to be found. Because we can't find these things.
Absolutely agree.
We can't get our hands on them. It's like you go into places, you can find signs that they're there. The sightings aren't that rare. People are seeing these things. Why is it they practically are invisible? Mm-hmm. They're the kraken of the forest. So I'm curious to what the viewers think about this, and if they think that being unpredictable might be a methodology that could yield some results.
Yeah.
I think there is a guy that goes out and films, has his GoPro facing behind him.
I wanted one of those. I want one for the front and one for the back.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea if you're in the thick woods, because oftentimes the creatures, if I'm hunting something, like a moose or something, I want to get close to a moose, I'll sneak in behind them. I'll come in on their 6 where they can't see me. So, I mean, these things are using those same techniques. And if we're thinking about that they're using techniques, we could use that to our advantage. Mm-hmm. So there's a couple of things out of this sighting that I think are some lessons for us. One, that maybe we could use that unpredictability to possibly surprise these things and get the upper hand. The other part of it is a little more disturbing and devious, is the fact that people go missing.
Yeah, she was alone.
She was alone and terrified, and I think when you're terrified of these things, you're terrified for a damn good reason.